All right, I think we are rolling live. We are live. It says so right there on the
We
screen. Hello and
are.
welcome everyone to another installment of Get a Clue in 52 for speakers, or the speaker edition, with co-author and friend and so many other ways that I refer to you now, Sue Mathieson, all the way from down under. How are you, Sue? Happy Friday.
Thank you. I'm really well, and good to be here. Had a bit of an early or extra early start this morning, having done a quick run out to the airport, dropped my daughter and her boyfriend off. They're off to Fiji for the week, sunning themselves at a resort. So I'm sure they will have a great time.
Well, last time we saw each other online last week, I was at a resort, Atlantis Resort in the Bahamas, and I think I've captured some of the color from being out in the sun. My head was peeling a little bit after the sunburn part of it went away, and now I'm enjoying the color of it all. But we're ready to get into a tip reading for today. And as always, the Get a Clue in 52 books. This is the fourth one that we've done. The first one was the original. Then we did the entrepreneur edition with Vipul Dial. Then last year I did the coaching edition, and now for speakers. So there's 5 categories that we're working through. We're in section 2 right now. But the first section, the first 10 tips of the year, all came from the integrity game, right? The integrity game is a 10-point model, and we took the 10 points on the model and turned them into tips. Essentially, the integrity game is understanding these 10 questions and then answering them. And then, of course, we get better when we share our answers with others, and then we get held accountable to living a life based on our own answers to our own integrity game. It gives us structural integrity, retrofits ourselves, right? And then we started the section that we're in right now, bring out your brand. So today is tip number 18 overall. I'm going to review the first 7 tips in this section that got us to where we are today. But in a couple of weeks, we're going to start section 3, which is be fearless. Now, the main point of this section, having played the integrity game and then having brought out our brand, now we're ready to write speeches. Okay, now we're ready to get into the speech preparation process. So within section 3, there's 8 tips that are all about my proven 8-step process for getting ready to speak. And we put 2 extra tips in the beginning to ready us for the 8-step process. Now, one of those steps is so important, we created a whole section out of it to break down outlining, organizing our thoughts, intro, body, conclusion, transition sentences. So we will talk about the elements, forms, and functions of speech prep, that middle piece, the 5th step to fearless public speaking. It's so important. It deserves its own section. Right? We get 10 full tips out of that. And then we're going to kind of cruise into the end of the year with 10 jovial tips about practice building. Like, all right, you can speak, you can do a speech, but you want to build a practice out of speaking. All right. And if so, there's some accountabilities in practice building or in business that whether you're a speaker or any other practice you'd want to build, you got to pay attention to these 12 basic accountabilities in business building. When I was in the Bahamas last week, it's the same thing for chiropractors and wellness professionals. They have a practice, right? And a lot of them are really good at putting their hands on people and creating wellness. But are you good at sales, marketing, operations, finance, accounts payable, accounts receivable, staffing, performance management, all the stuff, right? So we're going to talk about that at the end of the year. But where we're at right now is we are in section 2, which we've called bring out your brand. Now that we've got structural integrity, we want to paint it with what differentiates us. And we've been talking about bringing out your brand. So Sue, do you want to, and I'll do the messaging here, but you want to take us through a quick summary of the first 7 tips in this section, and then we'll go ahead and we'll read today's tip number 18. So go ahead. In bring out your brand, we started with tip number 11 overall. Go ahead.
Yeah, tip number 11 or 1 in this section was don't be a spectator. We need to be active and engaged with our brand, because the marketplace will decide for themselves. If we're not out there sharing our brand, they will make up their own mind. So
right.
Better to be proactive. Then we talked, tip number 2 in this section was brand versus branding. Brand being, from a grammar perspective, a noun versus the verb. We talked about the brand is the actual message, whereas branding is the actions that we take to
get the message out. Yeah.
Yeah. Then tip number 3, we started looking at the formula, and I love, Jeff, your math envy, and you using this as your opportunity to bring a little bit of math into what you do. So
the basic arithmetic functions, right? We've got the equal sign, the division sign, the multiplication sign, the minus sign, and the plus sign. And this is really fun. And of course, the tips that follow are breaking down each of these elements a little bit, right? Continue, Sue. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So to give context to what it all means, all the symbols. So the MP being the marketplace, and that it gets segmented out into the promises, amplified by the competitive advantages, take away the jargon, add sloganeering. And then we started to break that down more specifically as we moved into what counts as a promise, and particularly picking up the ASK acronym, being it needs to be attention gaining, needs to be sensational and capable.
Yeah. I mean, at core, there's other things that we could talk about in all of these tips. All of these tips scratch surface a little bit. But when we're making a promise to the marketplace, we want it to be attention gaining. We want it to be the biggest promise we could possibly keep. And of course, we got to make sure that it is, in fact, keepable. Go ahead, Sue.
Yeah. So tip number 5 was difference making differentiation.
And by the way, I'm sorry to cut you off, but just to not confuse anybody, it's actually tip number 15 overall. It's just 5 within section 2. So as you see the banners coming across, you're saying 5 and the banner says 15. Okay. And just in case there's a detail-oriented person out there, let's go ahead. Sure. It's tip number 15 overall, but 5 within this section. Go ahead, Sue.
Fair enough. Yeah. So we were looking at that identification of our brand is both equal to, but different from, and it's about that's what makes up the differentiation. And we did a little bit of a deep dive into that, and that it's the promises that break up our are going to be different depending on the segment. And I like your analogy of the pizza and having the different pieces. And so our marketplace will be segmented into those particular areas, and our promises will be different depending on the segment that we're looking at.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that's important is when we talk about competitive advantages, the CA part of the equation, just to put the equation back up on the screen, where we're talking about the CA, competitive advantages. Now we broke that down a little bit and talking about difference-making differentiation, right? So what you're talking about is, depending on the market segment that I'm speaking to, one segment of my market may be looking for a certain advantage that doesn't matter to the other segment of my market. So it's good for us to know all of our competitive advantages, so we put the right feet forward when we're in front of different market segments. Now, difference-making differentiation, if I may, my favorite part about this is that in the laws of physics, all we need is a fingerprint to differentiate us. But in the laws of marketing, we need difference-making differentiation. My tax identification number or my bank account number is enough to differentiate me from any other business, but that's not what's going to get people to buy from me. So we need to understand competitive advantages from the perspective of what our marketplace considers to be an advantage, not just my name or social security number, but what matters to the marketplace and to the market segment based on the promises, etc. So I just wanted to add that bit of color there.
Yeah, no, it's great because and I think that's important to consider it from the perspective of the marketplace. You know, what's meaningful for them. Moving then into tip 16 was make it simple.
Yeah, and this is, by the way, that's our breakdown of the S, or actually the J, the minus J piece is that what we were adjusting there. Go ahead, Sue.
Yes, yeah. So recognizing that we get comfortable with the language that we use in our own environment, and in our conversation in that week, we actually started talking about getting rid of it can almost become a little bit of, I'm moving out of my comfort zone. I've become so used to the language that I'm using, but we need to be conscious of that and get rid of it, because it's not going to be meaningful necessarily to our audience.
Yeah, not only they may not understand it, but worse yet, it may be off-putting when we're using jargon and we're suffering from the curse of knowledge, where we're in our comfort zone because of our knowledge and it's our safe space. And then we don't want to either do the work of coming up with different language, or it's a threat to our ego to come up with different language. And we're not anticipating how off-putting it may be to our targets, our prospects, our customers, our clients, our audiences, etc. So we want to make it simple. We want to make it as easy to digest. That's why I use metaphors like pizza and basic arithmetic symbols. And I'm trying to always make it funny and silly and laughable and digestible, bite-sized and delicious. That's why I like Kluby snacks. And so it's important to eliminate jargon from our marketing, right? And again, that's marketing. And once somebody comes on board and they're a client of ours, then there's all kinds of fine print that people may need to read that could be jargon based. But we're talking about marketing and branding ourselves as speakers and encouraging a marketplace to hire us to speak at their events, or on and on. So, and then the final piece of the equation, Sue, go ahead, was this plus S. So what's, that took us to last week, right?
Yeah, which was make it stick. And we've done the work. If we've done the work of getting rid of that language that we're used to, it's then replacing that with language that is going to land with our audience and be memorable. And that was what we were talking about there with making it stick. And we talked through some well-known examples of brand names just to help give some idea of what that might look like. And then that now brings us to tip number 18 today, which is be the promise.
Here we are. All right. Well, I'm ready to get into it. We're going to go ahead and read word for word now in Get a Klu in 52 for Speakers. Tip number 18, having reviewed the sections, having reviewed the tips in this section that got us to tip number 18, let's go ahead and get into some word for word. So here we go on page number 84 for those of you that are following along at home. A company can have brand promises, a product or service can have brand promises, and individuals, especially speakers, can have brand promises. When we focus on our personal brand, we must focus on our promise to be the promise. A great brand promise is only partly about you, as we discussed earlier when breaking down the ingredients of a promise. We were focused on your clients and your audience. Having done that, I now must add that your brand will be something that you will need to be. Beyond being something you can deliver for your audiences and customers, quote, at all times, your behaviors will have to represent and be consistent with the branding you've put out into the marketplace. Remember also that perception is reality, so it is essential that you carefully cultivate your image. When you take the time to define yourself and present this definition to the public, you will benefit from the hard work of knowing who you really are and who you really can be on a daily, hourly, minute-by-minute basis. ... Here it comes. Ready? In bold and in italics. I'm trying to say something important here. Are you ready, Sue? Because who you really are is usually what the real brand really is. All right. Continuing. Take some time to reflect on section 1, where we were playing the integrity game. The more you embrace that in your life, the more naturally the very essence of who you can really be will shine through. You will be able to showcase your personality, values, authenticity in your brand. Your personal brand is an extension of your professional identity. Effective branding can set you apart from the competition and help you grow your speaking career, because people connect with people whom they can relate to on a personal level.
I have been playing the integrity game for a while now, and I've certainly noticed a deeper knowing of who I am that colors all that I say and do. The more I embed answers to each of the 10 questions into my life, the stronger and more natural the message that flows from within. What I hadn't done, though, was stop to consider that this shift was more purposefully defining who I am every moment of the day, and therefore building my personal brand.
To extend that further, let me ask another question. What personality attributes and values would you like to showcase through your brand?
I often get comments about what a great smile I have. So it would make sense to bring that through in some way. I'm warm, friendly, and generally curious about other people. And I present well in the way I dress. I'm not sloppy in my appearance.
And now we're changing the tenses a little bit. It's always different when we're reading word for word versus for the reader. But here we go. Sue went on to talk about her values, saying, like imagine dropping into our coaching session and reflecting. So Sue went on to talk about her values, saying, quote, and you can actually read this. I'm quoting you right here. You want to go ahead and read that?
Yeah. Insofar as values, reliability comes to mind. I deliver what I've committed to.
Mm-hmm.
Authenticity is another one. So what you see is what you get. Honesty, particularly in the sense that anything I would want to speak about comes from lived experience.
Sue, from what you've described, your values and authenticity go very much hand in hand. You will want to ensure that your brand promise is aligned with your brand's core values. Each brand promise should be a reflection of your brand's true identity and be consistent across all touch points. This includes marketing materials right through to interactions with your audiences. Two more things about being the promise are very well said in my soft skills training libraries course on personal branding that you have access to, Sue, as a VIP client. Let's summarize some of its relevant tips here. Bullet point number 1, be real. First and foremost, you'll need to keep it real. People are attracted to genuine people. The key to personal branding is to make it personal. Communicating dry facts will not impress most people. Your brand must have personality. Develop a persona that attracts people, share ideas, implement humor, make connections with people. Having an online presence makes sharing your persona much easier. While you need to remember to be real, you are under no obligation to share personal details about yourself. But everything that you do share must be genuine. Never make up facts, statistics, or tell lies. Fact checking has become easier than ever, and lies will do nothing to improve your brand's reputation. And we have a little breakout of a Klu snack right here. Let me just go ahead and read that. Being real is about being truthful to what is known. Being vulnerable, however, is the effort to learn more about what is true. So that Klu snack is going to come up in context here in a minute. As a matter of fact, that's the next bullet point. Being vulnerable again. Being real is about the truth. Yeah, being real is about being truthful to what is known. Being vulnerable, however, is the effort to learn more about what is true, to look further within for additional important truths that may not be known yet. In very simple terms, I'd recommend a SWOT analysis. SWOT stands for strengths, weakness, opportunity, and threats. By identifying your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, you will be able to define your brand and understand what you have to offer. But beware, you are also likely to identify areas that need improvement. So strengths are the internal characteristics that create competitive advantage. For example, an ability to deviate from script while staying on track. Into animated nonverbal communication could be valuable strengths for a speaker. Weaknesses, internal weaknesses that need to be improved. A tendency to entertain tangents or speak too fast there's a typo that I got to note, could be an example of a weakness for a speaker. We're missing a C on the could. Do you see that too, Sue?
Yes.
It's amazing how much you'll catch. You do it with a fine-tooth comb, and there's always something. All right. Opportunities are external. There are always opportunities for you to take advantage of in the marketplace. Getting involved in associations, schools, clubs, and other organizations are examples of opportunities to promote yourself as a speaker. And threats. External threats cannot be controlled, but they may be addressed in your opportunities. Competition with a differentiated skill set is a threat, much less so when we command our own branding. A SWOT analysis will be unique to each speaker or business. Taking a moment to honestly assess your situation will allow you to complete a personal SWOT analysis and help understand which day-to-day behaviors will come naturally in support of your brand and which behaviors will represent more challenges. Keep working on being the promise. Our next tip will help you do just that, Sue. All right. And just to back up, remember, when we wrote this book, what we were trying to do is we're trying to capture the coaching dialogues, right? We're trying to drop readers into and summarize what it's like to immerse in coaching, right? I've been all around the world doing 1 full day, 2 full days, 3 full days of coaching, and that coaching, that mentoring, those dialogues are super important as we tried to capture it here in the book. But it's just a little bit interesting when we're reading it word for word, the first person point of view or the dialogue sharing back and forth. It gets a little quirky, but it's still fun to work through. But there you have it. Tip number 18 is to be the promise. And very simply, we're saying, now that we've done all this work of creating a brand, right? What's our brand as a speaker? What's our brand for our products or services or company, what have you? Now, like, we're focusing on personal brand. Like, in what about the values? Can I show up every day as a product of the product? When I behave, am I on time? Am I punctual? Do we start at 11 o'clock? Accountability, like punctuality is a form of accountability. So if I'm promising accountability in the marketplace, am I accountable? Am I punctual? You understand? We're talking about showing up as a reflection of our brand, our core values. Is it honesty? Is it humor? Is it joviality? Is it warmth? Is it caring? Is it right? And so we're talking about living every day, showing up every day, kind of like wearing, if you will, right? Like decorated, wearing, accessorized outfit. Like, what's our outfit? What's our, my shirt, right? You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm finding the right words right now, but can I be? Is my behavior? Is my actions? Can people look at me and observe me and see my brand promises? See the values that support my brand promises in my behavior, in my actions, in the way that I conduct myself. What say you around all of this, Sue?
I've had a very interesting experience this week. And before I go into the detail of that, we talked a little bit about the SWOT analysis here of identifying areas that need improvement. And my experience this week wasn't so much of looking at the gaps, but finding myself in a situation, and again, jumping back a bit, we have always said that Section 1, Section 2, and Section 5 are relevant for both speakers and non-speakers alike.
Right.
So this particular situation was not in a speaking environment. However, I noticed that I was frustrated, getting almost that visceral response to things that were happening. And when I stood back from it, I realized my brand was actually being compromised by a situation that I was in. And it was a really good opportunity to go, okay, I've got control here in the sense of I can choose, how am I going to show up? Am I going to allow myself in this particular situation to be defined by a role description? Or am I going to find a way to navigate through that and show up as my true brand so that I don't feel compromised? I don't feel, so that I reduce the frustration of not adding value to the extent that I know I could. So it was a very interesting opportunity to reflect on that. And we opened up in this tip exactly about that, your behaviors representing and being consistent with the branding. So I consciously chose to change my behavior to be more assertive, so that I created opportunity to showcase my knowledge, my experience, and partly avoid being treated as enough. But again, it was the integrity. That whole first section that we talked about.
Yeah.
I came back to that structural integrity that I have built for myself. And it was that foundation that I could confidently stand on and go, this is who I am. Why let an external situation compromise?
Yeah, a pressure test. You were able to withstand the pressure test and keep doing what you're built to do, keep doing what you're made to do.
Yes.
Now, my question is, in this process of shifting and reminding yourself, right, and then making a decision on how you want to go, were you able to bring in this smile that we talked about in tip number 18? Were you able to do it with a smile? Were you able to do it with warmth, right? If you felt pressure tested, sometimes that's not always the easiest situation within to be smiling and to be warm and to be caring when we feel pressure tested. Pressure tests trigger ego defense, right? Does this make sense? So I'm just curious,
Yes,
how much of that smile, that caring, that warmth, that hey, you're like safe with Sue because Sue's the CEO saver, so you're safe with Sue. How much of that was able to come through, or maybe not up front, or did it merge? Tell me more.
That would definitely be something I could work on, is how to blend that more effectively to actually certainly I wasn't reactive, and I'd probably say I was fairly neutral in sort of the way, thinking back to one conversation in particular. So there was probably a lot more opportunity to shift more into that warmth and really think about, okay, when there is that pressure test, yes, I've got the confidence, I've got that foundation to stand on, but okay, how can I work on shifting more into that warmth, that I'm a safe person still to be with and to be, so that's interesting. So probably not.
yeah. Just because we understand branding and we're working on it, we're improving ourselves all the time, doesn't mean we're not human, right? So when we say be the promise, I guess ... as best we can, or as often as we can, or as much as we can, or always strive to be the promise. Like, we're not trying to fool anybody into thinking that 100% of the time we're always going to be able to represent our chosen values. We choose our values from a logical place, but then triggered emotionally, we're going to be a human being, right? But it's neat to hear that the integrity game gives you that structural integrity and that resilience to withstand pressure tests, and the confidence to assert yourself. And I'm sure that what came out, I'm asking you to elaborate on the anecdote a little bit, but problem solving. Yeah, you ended up being able to assert yourself into. I'm sure it was you were offering problem solving solutions that may not, without making that decision to assert, you may not have been in the position to solve a problem. I don't know the anecdote, but I'm assuming
the situation was where a solution had been almost dictated by another party, and I was very conscious that not all the users, so we're talking sort of ICT systems here, not all the users had necessarily been involved in that conversation that should have been. And so it was, for one, challenging the prescriptive solution that was being provided, and then asking questions to initiate conversation and help to open up the possibility, without being like coming in directly and saying, oh, but you haven't done X, Y, Z, at least asking good questions that would allow conversation to open up and go, oh, hang on, maybe we do need to explore this further. And that the solution that has been prescribed at this point, there might be other opportunities. So I was able to do that. I was able to come back to the conversation, and with some further insights, some further questions, I guess do that fairly conversationally. So coming back to, was I warm and smiling? Maybe could have been a bit more, but it was probably not too bad in terms of at least keeping that openness. and that dialogue. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always a good idea, and we're kind of getting into like your favorite area, which is coaching and situations, and group dynamics, and superior subordinate relations, and advocacy, and stakeholder, in internal dynamics. But I don't know how often inside of your organization are you ever speaking, or are you ever presenting? Is it small group, large group? If it's ever 12 or more people, it's large group, right? 11 or 3 to 11 people is small group. When we're talking about large group, that's a form of public speaking, right? So even in the trenches, in corporate or in institutions, if we have there's forms. Public speaking isn't just the stage at events, right? To root it back into what we're talking about as we're talking about Get a Klu in 52 for speakers, right? These are tips, and of course we know speakers and non-speakers alike. But I was just listening to your anecdote for the tie-in to root it in what it is we're talking about. And what we're talking about in tip number 18 today is being our promises, showing up in ways where our behavior, it's not just what we say, but it's what we do, right? It's you follow action, speak louder than words. So you can have the best brand on the planet from a words perspective or slogan. Remember what we were talking about last week, make it sticky, sloganeering, and before that, get rid of jargon, and let's understand our difference making differentiation, competitive advantages, and let's break down the elements of a promise, and let's have fun with the branding equation, and scratch my itch of math envy or what have you. But after all of that work to come up with a tagline, like, in other words, like I joked around, right? I say, hey, some people go for the jugular, but I go for the hugular. But if I say the hugular, it's great, right? But then if I reach out and give a handshake or a fist bump, I'm not being the brand.
Yes.
I'm not being the promise. So if I say, plenty of people in the world go for the jugular, but I go for the hugular. And now, then I reach in and I give like a good hug, right? Like, I've been complimented many, many, many times. And sometimes I'll see people and, hey, Jeff, come here and give me one of those Klu hugs, right? My hugs mean something. I care. It's important to me. Embrace, connection, nonverbal communication, a willingness to be vulnerable, communicating people are safe, embraced, heard, supported. All of that can come through a hug, right? But have you ever seen the hugs where people like they lean in and they just barely touch their shoulders and a tap on the back, and then they come on, right? You know what I'm saying? So if my hug isn't like a hug, I'm not being my promise to the marketplace. Is that I promise you'll be supported. I promise you'll be embraced. I promise we'll connect. I promise my mastery of communication will include everything verbal and nonverbal alike. If these are my promises into the marketplace and I give a weak ass hug, shame on me. Just to use one example. All right. So what else for today, Sue? I'm almost ready to, let me just let people know that we have a free report. It's one of these deals where you give us your email address and we'll give you something of value in a PDF. It's a branding report, a branding guide, or guide you to elements of branding. If you're not capturing and taking furious notes in these live streams, you can get a lot done in your personal branding just from these live streams, I believe. Go back and watch previous recordings if you want. But you can also just send us an email and we'll give you a branding guide or a guide to better branding. And it's, that you see it there. TIG stands for Integrity Game, BOYB. Bring out your brand, right? And tinyurl.com is always the prefix to condense the larger leaks into something smaller. But what's going to happen is at the end of this guide, you're going to be invited to take the next step and actually book a free session with an Integrity Game certified coach that's ready to help you bring out your brand and brainstorm and discuss it in real time and ask the questions and ideate and wherever you want that conversation to go. We always offer 2 complimentary coaching sessions to anybody that hasn't had them already. And if you want that first session focused on branding, then go ahead and get into this funnel that you can see right here. It starts up front with a free Bring Out Your Brand report, and then it ends in your ability to schedule complimentary coaching with Integrity Game certified coaches. Now, having said all of that, one other announcement: save the date. Sue, I'm this close, like 99.9% to an approval. I was at the University Club of Top Symphony Tower in downtown San Diego last night, and the Sports and Entertainment Committee is sponsoring the event. We're going to reboot Authors Hour. You are going to be a featured panelist, and I'm in conversations now with 1 or 2 other authors that are members of the club to join you. where I'll offer my
Fantastic.
skills. I'll offer my skills to facilitate, and we're going to bring out your brands in an author hour. But we're going to talk about what was the process of writing the book, what was the process of publishing the book, what's the process of marketing the book or selling the book, or how does this book fit into your career now? What's coming next? I'm going to bring out all of those questions for all panelists, and then members that are attending or guests that are attending, maybe they have a book inside of them or an idea. They get to ask you questions. So I'm going to do a little bit of interview style, a little bit of panel style, a little bit of roundtable, a little bit of Q&A and audience participation. And I'm going to be facilitating all of this, which will, of course, bring out my brand as a master facilitator. And I can really hold and manage a room, right? And I'm really excited about it. It's coming together. It's coming together in such a way that I'm getting ready to actually ask for sponsors. I want people to sponsor the event so we could put wine on the menu, that we could put hors d'oeuvres out there for guests that are attending. We can put a value on this event. So some of those pieces are coming together, but I'm so excited about it. I'm and confident that it's going to be a great event. I'm getting ready to ask, hey, do you want to put $1,000 towards this so we can offer food to people? Do you want to put $1,000 to this so everybody that registers can get a drink ticket? I don't know if I'm going to pay for parking. Parking is a little bit more expensive. Downtown parking. But people park on the street, or you could get valet is kind of expensive, but that's really the only barrier to entry. Sometimes it's difficult for people to get downtown, find parking, or have to deal with parking. But if our event starts after 6 p.m., then parking on the street is free, right? So maybe 6 to 6:30 p.m. or 6 to 6:45 networking, and then we do our author's hour of programming. And if it gets to be that late, we're going to want there to be some food in the room, but it's all coming together. And I want everybody to save the date. June 25th in San Diego at the University Club. We're going to reboot, because I've done this before in 2022. I hosted like 4 of these authors hour, where I interview featured authors to talk about the process of writing a book, publishing a book, marketing a book, selling a book, integrating a book into our career, etc. So that's going to be really, really exciting. And I hope everybody out there right now watching, or anybody watching or recording this, you put it on your calendar. June 25th. Sue is going to be stateside here in San Diego, all the way from Melbourne, Australia. And we're going to get the pictures. We're going to get the videos. We're going to bring out the stories of various authors. And it's just going to be super, super cool. I'm visualizing it every day, as a matter of fact, and it's coming together. So there's that. And I don't have any other announcements, right? We're here. Last call for comments, questions, jokes, riddles, haikus, limericks, or expressions of gratitude. What do you got, Sue?
I think for me, this week was just such an affirmation of all that we've talked about so far. Section 1, the integrity game, and the power that when you really practice those and embed the answers to each of those questions in the framework into your life, you start to live it, you know it within yourself, that feeds so nicely into what is your brand. And I just I know I keep saying it every week, but I have absolutely loved going through each of the tips, even within bringing out your brand, because it's really reinforced for me, what is my brand? And being able to know that, not just theoretically, but to really live it. And what we said about today, it's behavior. It's not just what we're speaking, it's behavior. So I've loved the week by week showing up, but it's reinforcing for me in a very real way a lot of what we're talking about. And it's a lot of fun. A lot of fun to be able to go, oh, this works.
There's a lot of stuff out there that doesn't, right? But of course, the saying is nothing works unless we do. So it all comes down to us being conscious, us being vulnerable, us being willing to take action, all the things that we summarized in today's tip, of course. But I love hearing this feedback, Sue. It's a treat on a week-to-week basis to bond with you and go through this journey. Our relationship is always already so strong, right? And the way that we connected, and now though it's evolved, and like, it's I don't want to get too sad, but like, the 53rd week will be week number 1 of the next book, right? And so it's like,
That's right.
I don't want to say it, but what am I going to do without you, Sue, on a week-to-week basis? I mean, for years, except for the year I did it with Vipul, of course, when Vipul was my co-author, that was 1 year, but the other 2 years, well, 3 years, I want to say, right? I think this is my 5th year of doing these, because I think the very first book, I did it in 2020, and then I did the same book in 21. And that was just me by myself reading the tip, and guests would show up, and it was Zooms, remember? So it was COVID. So more people were coming on board because we were fighting through COVID and all of that. But now every week to walk this walk with you, to walk this road with you, it's something that I'm enjoying very much. And it's something that I already know I'm going to miss when it's over, but we're going to have to brainstorm new ways to collaborate. And I'm sure that you'll always attend whatever I'm doing. So it's nothing to be sad about. But I just want to mirror and echo the journey, the fun and the bond and the rhythm and the consistency, right? That we're connecting over every single week as we read these tips. And so,
it's great.
Yeah. What else? What else?
So I can recommend anyone, if there's anyone out there listening, watching a recording, who would like to do what I've been able to do and be with Jeff every week, I highly recommend it. It's a fantastic journey. And
wow.
I do. I mean that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a little bit, I'm humble about it, but it's wonderful to get to make a difference. It's wonderful to follow through on the promise. I remember last year when I said, hey, I'm thinking about doing next year's book, if anybody's interested in collaborating with me. And I just threw it out there. And when you stepped up, we still didn't know what actual book it was going to be. And so it's time for me to start thinking about that. I'm thinking about doing a book on Klubi snacks. It's just like, what if I could find the best 52 of the best Klubi snacks and put that out there and just read a Klubi snack every week and just talk about the snack. Instead of reading tips that we find a Klubi snack within, why not put Klubi snacks on center stage and see, why not me? I mean, there's quotes all the time. You see motivational quotes all the time on the internet, right? People are famous motivational quotes, and why not me? Why not institutionalize Klubi snacks and make it a thing? So that's what I'm thinking about so far. And then I could have a lot of different authors, right? Then I could put a list of Klubi snacks out there to people and say, hey, do you want to elaborate on this? Do you have a story that embodies this? Do you identify with this Klubi snack? Do you have an anecdote from your life where you actually lived this lesson, learned this lesson, right? It could open things up. So maybe you're not involved in a whole entire book project the way that you've committed to, but maybe you want to write a couple of paragraphs or a blog that supports a Klubi snack, or maybe you want to be a special guest on one of the, who knows, right? I'm just brainstorming all of the options.
That'd be a lot of fun for people.
Yeah, I can tell you also that I had a really productive conversation yesterday with the college recruiting coordinator, Joey Santani, who helped my son get to college and to San Diego State, and was the recruiting coordinator to expose him to opportunities and help him manage himself and save face, and like a headhunter or a recruiter would, right? We are in talks about doing a second version of the integrity game.
Okay.
Yeah, but to focus on what he does for a living, right? I got a text this morning. We had this conversation, and I was telling him about how I wrote the original integrity game and what the approach is and what the strategy is. And I get the text from him this morning. My head is spinning with ideas/thoughts. And I said to him, that genie is not going back into the bottle. Let's go. So I'm excited about it's another brand promise that I can make into the marketplace. Like, hey, we can co-author a book together. Hey, I could package what you do for a living in a really digestible book that'll serve your business in many, many ways, right? We talked about, helping him with his prospecting, or helping him, read the book and read about all of these other families and how I help everybody. So it could be an information source, a marketing source. It can help him with sales, but also as he wants to scale his business, if we capture what he does in a book, now it can be part of a training tool internally when he's recruiting junior recruiters that can help him scale his business. And so we're talking about packaging everything he does. Like, the idea is like frequently asked questions, right? When you go to a website and you get, right?
Yes.
So it's like that. Frequently asked questions, we put those into the book, right? And everything that we're talking about right now, what's your promise to the marketplace? What's your competitive advantage as a college recruiting coordinator? How do we make sure that those competitive advantages and those promises show up in the story? So we have to figure out characters, right? And which character is going to hire you and have success at the end? Which character is going to hire your competitor and deal with all of the reasons that you shouldn't hire competitors? Which character is not going to hire anybody? And how are they going to struggle? So we were brainstorming, hey, one player in family doesn't hire anybody. They think they can do it all on their own. And so they're going to we're going to see them get through certain challenges. Another family is going to hire Joey's competition, right? And somebody that doesn't have Joey's competitive advantages, and they're going to, encounter these problems. And then another family is going to hire Joey and experience all the beautiful brilliance that I got to experience and my son got to experience working with Joey, getting to AJ's number 2 on his list, in terms of his dream schools. AJ got to number 2 on his list. And that's a pretty good, successful story. But it's just this, I don't know, you got me on a tangent now thinking about next year's book and whether,
But it comes back to your brand, and it comes back to you being your promise.
Yeah, I live it. Yeah, I live it every day. That's what we were talking about today, is being the promise. And I'm a human being too, right? And so I'm not always 100% living with all of my core values, right? And this is one of the reasons I wrote the integrity game, because I want more integrity in my life, right? When I would be self-reflexive and get disappointed in myself, it's like, hey, how do I retrofit? How am I resilient to the pressure test so that I'm not lured into undesirable behaviors? How can I stand upright the largest percentage of the time in the framework and so forth? And now that I'm a 5-time self-published author, I show up that way everywhere I go. And we're doing Author's Hour, and we're reading tips, and I'm having another conversation with another version of the integrity game, and I'm thinking about a Klu snack book. So I'm being the brand all the time, thinking about author. Brian Tracy, and he taught me, like, once you write your first book, that's hard, right? But every book after that is so much easier, and it becomes addicting a little bit. Like I'm uneasy with the idea of not putting out at least one book every single year for a minimum of 10 years. I'm halfway there. Wow. Where did all the time go? But thank you for being my ride or die on this project, Sue. We're immortalized together, and it's fun to read these tips every week. So unless there's anything else to communicate today, I'm ready to sign off. Do you have anything else for today? As last call on tip number 18.
No, nothing else. Nothing else for me. Always fun to jump on, read the tip, see where the conversation goes. It's always really good. Really good. So Thank you.
Well, thank you for everything as well, Sue. And I'm sure we're going to be talking again in a couple of hours on different issues. I look forward to that. But in the meanwhile, be well, and I'll see you a little bit later, definitely next week. And thanks to everybody out there that's taking time from whatever it is you may be doing to chime in and see what kind of value we have for you here, whether it's live session as we're streaming or watching a recording at some point in the future. Thank you for taking any time at all. We hope that we're delivering on some value for you. All right. Take care, everybody. We'll see everyone next week for tip number 19. All right. Bye, Sue.
Thank you. Bye.